I believed the worst tragedy of my life was a stale marriage until the day I earned my dream promotion. It took my husband exactly 4 hours to steal the luxury sedan I had worked for and gift it to his mother. I stood in the freezing parking lot thinking I had hit rock bottom, unaware that a single cold glance from my boss was about to ignite a fire that would burn their entire world down. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and at 32 years old, I had convinced myself that the permanent ache behind my eyes was just the price of ambition. I sat in my glass-walled office on the 14th floor of the Northline Media headquarters in downtown Denver, staring at a spreadsheet that would have made a lesser strategist weep. I was a white girl from a working-class family who had clawed her way up the corporate ladder one 18-hour day at a time, terrified that if I stopped moving for even a second, I would slide right back into the poverty I had spent a decade outrunning. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, displaying a text from my husband, Ethan Cole. It was a picture of a vintage guitar pedal with the caption, "Invested in the future today. Babe." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Ethan was 35, a man with the soul of a rock star and the employment history of a drifter. He had not held a steady paycheck in 3 years, yet he always spoke with the unearned confidence of a man on the brink of stardom. To him, my salary was our safety net, and his erratic gigs were the grand destiny we were both waiting for. I thought about our rental house in Aurora, a mid-range duplex that cost $2,000 a month. I paid the rent. I paid the utilities. I paid for the groceries. I had carved out a tiny corner in the guest room as my home office, a neat, organized fortress where I could breathe. The rest of the house, specifically the living room, had been colonized by Ethan. It was a chaotic studio of tangled wires, half-written lyric sheets, and empty beer cans. "It is for the creative process, Lauren," he would say when I asked him to clean up. "You are so rigid. You need to flow." The problem wasn't just the mess, it was the way he viewed me. To Ethan, I was a resource. We had a joint bank account because he insisted that married couples should share everything, yet the flow of currency only went one direction. He drove my sedan, a reliable but aging Honda, and called it our car. He spent my bonuses and called it our money. And then there was his mother, Martha. Martha Cole was a woman in her 60s who had turned passive aggression into an Olympic sport. She viewed my career not as an achievement, but as a direct insult to her son's masculinity, while paradoxically demanding the fruits of my labor. "You look tired, Lauren," she had told me last Sunday dinner, pushing a plate of dry meatloaf toward me. "Maybe if you did not work so much, you could make this house a home." My friend Susan's daughter-in-law gave her husband's parents a cruise ticket for their anniversary. She knows how to sacrifice. I had bitten my tongue until I tasted copper. I wanted to scream that Susan's daughter-in-law probably didn't have a husband who drained their savings for audio equipment that gathered dust. But I didn't. I stayed silent because I believed in the narrative I had built. I told myself that I had turned down transfer offers to New York and Los Angeles to keep Ethan grounded. I told myself that if I just supported him enough, if I loved him hard enough, he would eventually wake up and become the partner I deserved. My boss, Gregory Hale, walked past my open door. He was a man in his 50s with silver hair and eyes like chipped ice. He was known throughout Denver for being cold, exacting, and terrifyingly fair. He paused, looking at the time. It was nearly 8 at night. "Mitchell," he said, his voice clipped. "Go home. The data will not change between now and tomorrow morning." "Just finishing the projection for the quarterly review." "Gregory," I replied, straightening my spine. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You work harder than anyone on this floor. Make sure you are investing that energy where it yields a return." He walked away before I could respond, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. I turned back to the window. The city lights of Denver were spreading out below me like a grid of gold and amber. From up here, the world looked organized. It looked manageable. I packed my bag, preparing for the long drive back to Aurora, back to the cluttered living room and the husband who was waiting for me to cook dinner because he had been too busy creating art to boil pasta. It will be worth it, I whispered to the empty room. He is going to make it. We are going to make it. I truly believed that my resilience was the glue holding my life together. I did not know that I was actually just holding the door open for the people who would rob me blind. The fluorescent lights of the Monday morning boardroom felt brighter than usual, buzzing with an energy that pricked at my skin. I sat at the mahogany table, hands folded on my lap to hide the tremor in my fingers. The entire executive board was present, which usually meant someone was getting fired or the company was merging. Instead, the CEO slid a thick envelope across the polished wood toward me. "Congratulations, Lauren," he said. "We are pleased to appoint you as our new director of brand strategy." The air left my lungs. This was the position I had spent 5 years bleeding for. They listed the benefits: a 30% salary increase, a corner office, and a significant performance bonus. But then Gregory stood up. He walked to the window and gestured for me to follow. "We felt that the standard compensation package did not quite capture our appreciation for your loyalty," Gregory said, his voice unusually warm. "Look down." I looked. In the executive parking lot, sitting in the spot reserved for the Employee of the Year, was a brand-new charcoal gray luxury sedan. It gleamed under the Colorado sun. A giant red bow perched ridiculously on its hood. "It is part of the Executive Mobility Program," Gregory explained, "but we made an exception to the lease rule. The car is yours. Lauren, title and deed. Consider it a signing bonus." 10 minutes later, I was standing on the asphalt, surrounded by clapping colleagues. Someone was filming on their phone. The air was crisp, smelling of snow and exhaust fumes. I ran my hand over the cold metal of the hood, feeling a lump rise in my throat. For years, I had driven a car that rattled when it went over 60 miles per hour. For years, I had felt invisible. Gregory stood beside me, hands in his pockets. He leaned in, his voice low so only I could hear. "We invest in people who know how to carry responsibility. Mitchell, do not let us down." "I won't," I managed to say, my voice thick. Driving home felt like piloting a spaceship. The leather seats smelled rich and intoxicating. The engine purred with a silence that screamed money. My mind raced with fantasies. I imagined pulling into the driveway and seeing Ethan run out, his face lighting up with genuine pride. I imagined him hugging me, telling me that my hard work had finally paid off for us. I even imagined Martha looking at the car and finally nodding with respect, admitting that I was good enough for her son. I pulled into our driveway in Aurora, the sedan looking alien against the peeling paint of our garage door. Ethan was on the porch, smoking a cigarette. He froze. I stepped out, beaming, waving the keys. "I got promoted," I shouted. "Director." And they gave me this. Ethan dropped his cigarette. He walked slowly down the steps, his eyes fixed entirely on the car. He didn't hug me. He walked past me and ran his hand along the door frame. "Holy," he breathed out, whistling low. This is incredible, babe. Do you know how much this sound system is worth the acoustics in here? I could listen to my mixes and actually hear the bass." "I am the director of brand strategy." "Ethan," I said, my smile faltering slightly. He finally looked at me, grinning, but his eyes were vacant of the connection I craved. Yeah, that is amazing, really. But this changes everything. We look like players now, real players." That evening, Martha arrived with a casserole dish and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had heard the news. "Well," Martha said, settling onto the couch amidst Ethan's clutter, "I suppose congratulations are in order. You are so lucky, Lauren, to have a husband who supports your little corporate ambitions so selflessly." Most men would demand a wife who stays home and cooks. But Ethan, he is such a modern soul. He is your true muse, really. I gripped my wine glass tighter. The company gave it to me based on my performance metrics. Martha. Of course, dear. She waved a hand dismissively. But emotional support is the bedrock of success. You owe him a nice dinner, at the very least. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, Ethan leaned against the doorframe. The excitement was still buzzing in him, but it felt sharp now, calculating. Hey, he asked casually, too casually. So, the paperwork? Does the registration say Northline Media on it, or is it like a lease? No, I said, wiping my face with a towel, feeling a surge of pride again. It is a gift. The title is completely in my name. Ethan's eyes flashed. It was a micro-expression, a sudden spark of hunger that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a smooth, easy smile. That is great, babe, he said softly. Just really great. I went to sleep thinking he was proud. I didn't know he was doing math. It was exactly 1 week after the promotion when the ground fell out from under me. I had decided to use my lunch break at 12:30 to take the sedan to a detailing shop to get the windows tinted, a small customization I had been looking forward to all morning. I rode the elevator down to the garage, the keys heavy and reassuring in my pocket, humming a tune under my breath. But when I reached row B, spot 14, the asphalt was bare. I stopped cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. I blinked, thinking I had forgotten where I parked, but the bold white letters painted on the concrete were unmistakable, reserved for L. Mitchell. I spun around, scanning the rows of cars, panic rising in my throat like bile. No, 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 I whispered, fumbling for my phone. Please tell me it was not stolen. I ran to the security booth, my breath coming in short gasps. The guard, a man named Henderson who usually joked about the weather, looked grim when I told him my car was missing. He pulled up the CCTV footage on his monitor. It was not stolen, Ms. Mitchell, Henderson said, pointing at the grainy screen. C tow truck came in at 10:15 this morning. They had a key and authorization papers. I leaned in, squinting. The footage showed a yellow tow truck hooking up my brand new car. On the side of the truck, a logo was clearly visible: O'Malley's Auto Repair. My stomach turned to ice. That was the garage 3 blocks from Martha's house in Aurora. Authorization from who? I asked, my voice trembling. I am the owner. I was upstairs. The driver said the request came from the primary household contact. Henderson replied, looking uncomfortable. I dialed Ethan immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed Martha. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice sickeningly sweet. Oh, Lauren, is something wrong? She asked. Martha, where is my car? I demanded, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Car, I am not sure what you mean. Dear, I am just out running errands. Very busy day. The reception is terrible here, she said. And then the line went dead. I left work early, my hands shaking so badly I could barely steer the old Honda. When I pulled into our driveway, the garage door was closed. I burst into the house. Ethan was sitting on the couch, surrounded by his synthesizers, eating a slice of cold pizza. He looked up, completely unbothered. You are home early, he said. Where is it, Ethan? I screamed, throwing my bag on the floor. Where is the car? Ethan sighed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Calm down, Lauren. You are being hysterical. I moved the car to Mom's place. You what? I choked out. Mom needs a reliable vehicle more than you do, he said, his tone infuriatingly reasonable. Her hip has been acting up, and that old van of hers is a death trap. You have the Honda. It runs fine. We do not need two cars, and honestly, it is selfish for you to drive a luxury sedan while your family struggles." "That car is in my name," I yelled, stepping closer to him. "It was my bonus. You cannot just give it away." Ethan stood up then, crossing his arms. "Actually, I helped you out with that. I signed the transfer papers this morning. I sold it to Mom for $1. It is a tax loophole, babe. Very smart financial move. The value of the asset is now protected, and I am handling the investment side of things with the equity we saved." He was speaking gibberish. Financial buzzwords designed to make me feel stupid. "You forged my signature," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You cannot transfer a title without my signature." He walked over to the messy coffee table and picked up a piece of paper, holding it out to me. It was a photocopy of the title transfer. There, at the bottom, was my name. The loops were too wide, the slant too vertical. It was a clumsy imitation of my handwriting. "That is not my signature," I said, staring at it. "Don't be crazy," Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "You signed it last night. You were so tired after work. You probably just forgot. You have been exhausted lately. Lauren, forgetting things, losing track of time. I am just trying to simplify our lives so you do not burn out." I looked from the paper to his face. He wasn't sorry. He didn't even look guilty. He looked at me like I was a child he had successfully managed. I grabbed the photocopy and walked out the front door, needing air. I stood in the driveway, the Colorado wind cutting through my thin blouse. The temperature was dropping, but I couldn't feel the cold. I looked down at the forged signature, then at the empty space where my achievement used to be. He hadn't just taken a machine of glass and steel. He had looked at the one thing that proved my worth to the world and decided it belonged to his mother simply because he said so. He stole it, I whispered to the empty street. He stole everything. The days following the theft of my car blurred into a suffocating gray haze. I expected Ethan to apologize, or at least to show a flicker of remorse. Instead, he twisted the narrative until I felt like the villain in my own life. He sat at the kitchen table, tears streaming down his face, playing the victim with terrifying conviction. "You do not understand what it is like to grow up with nothing, Lauren," he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. "My mother scrubbed floors so I could have guitar lessons. She sacrificed her entire life for me, and now, when I finally have the chance to pay her back, you make it about you. You are being so selfish. Is a car more important than family?" I stood there, paralyzed by his logic. "But it was not yours to give, Ethan." "A real man makes the hard decisions for the family," he snapped, his voice suddenly hard and devoid of tears. "I took the lead because you were too attached to material things. I did this for us." Then came the call from Martha. Her voice was sugary sweet, dripping with a triumph she barely bothered to conceal. "Oh, Lauren, I just had to call and thank you," she chirped. "The seat warmers are simply divine. I told Mrs. Higgins next door that my son bought me this beautiful machine. She was green with envy. Finally, I have the respect I deserve in this neighborhood." "Martha, listen to me." I tried to interrupt, my hand gripping the phone tight. "Ethan took that car without my now, do not be modest." She cut me off. "It is wonderful to see you finally supporting Ethan's role as the provider. He is such a good boy. We are going to take a drive up to the mountains this weekend. You should stay home and rest. You sound hysterical again." Sleep became a battlefield. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the driver's seat of the charcoal sedan. The leather was smooth under my hands, the engine humming. But when I looked into the rear-view mirror to check my lipstick, my reflection was gone. Instead, Martha's face stared back at me from the driver's seat, her mouth stretched into a distorted, mocking laugh while I was trapped in the trunk, screaming without sound. I would wake up gasping for air, the sheets soaked in sweat, while Ethan snored peacefully beside me. Returning to work was an exercise in humiliation. I parked my rusted Honda in the far corner of the garage, hoping no one would notice the absence of the gleaming executive car. But Northline Media was a small world. "Hey, Mitchell," a junior analyst called out as I walked toward the elevator. "Where is the spaceship? Did you crash it already?" "It is in the shop," I lied, feeling heat creep up my neck. "Custom detailing." "Takes a few weeks?" "Must be nice," he laughed. Jada, the social media manager who sat 2 cubicles down, did not laugh. She was a sharp, observant woman of 29 who missed nothing. She cornered me in the break room while I was staring blankly at the coffee machine. "You look like hell, Lauren," Jada said, her voice low. "And do not tell me it is just the new workload. You have been wearing the same blazer for 3 days. "It is nothing," I murmured, stirring sugar into black coffee. "Is it him?" she asked. "Is it the husband?" I looked at her, and the dam cracked just a fraction. "He did something. Stupid with the car. I am trying to fix it." "Stupid is forgetting to pick up milk," Jada said, her eyes narrowing. "Stupid is not what puts that look in your eyes. That look is fear." That night, while Ethan was out jamming with friends, which I now suspected was code for spending my money, I did not go to sleep. I went into my home office and locked the door. I turned on my laptop and logged into our joint bank account, something I hadn't done in months because Ethan always insisted he was handling the household ledger. I started scrolling. Then I started taking screenshots. It wasn't just the car. There was a cash withdrawal for $500 on the 12th, a transfer of $1,000 to an account labeled E. Cole Private on the 15th, a payment to a luxury audio equipment store for $2,000 the day after I received my last bonus. He had been siphoning my income for years. He had used my name, my credit score, and my hard-earned salary to fund a lifestyle he pretended to despise. I found an email in his open inbox on the family iPad confirming a credit card opened in my name, with the billing address listed as Martha's house. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark room. I looked at the long list of transactions, a digital paper trail of my own stupidity. I had thought I was a partner in a marriage. I had thought I was building a future. "I am not his wife," I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling with a cold, terrifying clarity. "I am just an ATM that cooks dinner." I saved every file to a hidden folder on my private drive. I printed hard copies of the forged title transfer and the bank statements. I wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried up, replaced by a hollow, aching void that was slowly, steadily filling with rage. The request from Human Resources was marked urgent and mandatory. 2 days later, on a crisp Wednesday morning, the company organized a formal photo shoot for the newly promoted directors to showcase the success of the executive mobility program. I tried to call in sick. I tried to schedule a conflicting client meeting, but the head of HR had been firm, telling me that absence was not an option for the company newsletter. I stood in the designated VIP section of the parking lot, my stomach twisting into hard knots. To my left, the director of sales leaned against his gleaming navy sedan. To my right, the VP of operations was polishing the hood of her white luxury SUV, and there I was, standing in front of an empty space where my reward should have been, with my rusted 10-year-old Honda parked 3 rows back in general admission. "Where is the chariot, Lauren?" a colleague asked, adjusting his tie. "Did you forget where you parked? It is undergoing maintenance." I lied, my voice thin. I did not know that 10 floors up, behind the tinted glass of the corner office, Gregory Hale was watching. He was observing the lineup, checking for uniformity. He saw the gap, and then he saw something else. A charcoal gray sedan with the distinct Northline Media dealer plates turned into the lot. The photographer, a young man with too much energy, waved his hands frantically. There she is. Bring it in here, right next to the sales team, he shouted, assuming the late arrival was me. But the car did not pull in smoothly. It jerked to a halt, and the window rolled down. It was not me behind the wheel. It was Martha. She had likely been driving nearby to visit her sister in the adjacent suburb, and, seeing the Northline banners, had decided to be curious. Or perhaps, in her twisted mind, she thought she belonged there. The photographer ran over. "Ma'am, we need you to position the vehicle for the shot." "Are you the new director?" Martha laughed, a loud cackling sound that carried across the asphalt. "Oh, heavens no, I am just a proud mother. My son bought me this car. He said, 'Mom, you deserve the best. My wife, well, she does not need to be fancy yet. Isn't he a saint?'" The silence that fell over the group was absolute. My face burned so hot I thought my skin would peel off. I wanted to dissolve into the pavement. Martha spotted me then, waving happily as if she hadn't just humiliated me in front of my entire professional network. "Lauren, look!" she shouted. "I figured out how to use the sport mode before I could vomit." The automatic glass doors of the lobby slid open with a violent whoosh. Gregory Hale stepped out. He did not look at the photographer. He did not look at the other directors. He walked in a straight line toward us, his stride eating up the distance. The air seemed to drop 10 degrees. He stopped 2 feet from Martha's window. He did not greet her. He turned his body slightly, angling himself so he was facing me, blocking Martha's view of the crowd. "Mitchell," Gregory said, his voice projecting clearly across the silent lot. "Is that the vehicle Northline Media issued to you under the terms of your bonus contract?" My throat felt like it was filled with broken glass. Everyone was staring. The lie I had been protecting, the illusion of the happy marriage. The supportive husband was shattering right there on the concrete. "Yes," I whispered. "I cannot hear you," Gregory stated flatly. I looked at Martha, who was suddenly looking confused, her smile faltering. I looked at Gregory, who was waiting, his expression unyielding but not unkind. It was a demand for truth. "The car is registered to me," I said, my voice shaking but growing louder. "But my husband, he transferred the title to his mother without my consent. I did not agree to this." A collective gasp rippled through my colleagues. Martha's face turned a blotchy red. "Now, wait just a minute," Martha sputtered, clutching the steering wheel. "This is a family matter. My son gave—" "Quiet!" Gregory snapped, not even looking at her. He pulled a radio from his belt. I had never seen him carry one, but he had grabbed it from the security desk on his way out. "Security, this is Hale." He spoke into the device, his eyes locked on mine. "I have unauthorized possession of disputed company assets in the main lot. Send the legal team down. Lock the gate. No vehicles leave this property until verified." He lowered the radio and looked at me. The coldness in his eyes had shifted. It was no longer the detached judgment of a boss evaluating a spreadsheet. It was the terrifying, focused calm of a general who had just decided to go to war. "You are not alone in this, Lauren," he said quietly, so only I could hear. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I didn't brush it away. I watched the security guards jogging toward the gate, and I realized with a jolt of adrenaline that the game had just changed. I was no longer the wife who took the scraps. I was the director of brand strategy, and I had the most powerful man in the building standing on my side of the line. The conference room on the executive floor was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the scratching of a pen on legal pads. It was not the kind of silence I was used to at home, the heavy, suffocating silence of walking on eggshells. This was the silence of precision. Gregory sat at the head of the table. To his right was the head of HR, and to his left were 2 attorneys from the internal legal department and an external counsel. "Start from the beginning, Mitchell," Gregory said, his hands clasped on the table. "Do not leave anything out." I took a shaky breath, placing the photocopied title transfer on the polished wood. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to speak. I told them everything. I told them about the missing keys. I told them about the tow truck. I told them about the signature that wasn't mine. "It is a clumsy forgery," I said, pointing to the loop on the L. But he convinced me that I might have signed it when I was tired. He made me feel like I was losing my mind. I looked down at my lap, the shame burning my cheeks. I know how this looks. I am a director of strategy, and I let my husband treat me like a child. I let him control the accounts because I wanted to keep the peace. I am sorry. "Stop!" Gregory's voice cut through the room like a knife. I looked up. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at me with furious intensity. "The victim is not the one who should be ashamed here," Gregory stated firmly. "You are a victim of fraud. Lauren, do not apologize for that." The lead attorney, a sharp woman named Reynolds, adjusted her glasses. "Technically, Ms. Mitchell, even though the title is in your name, the vehicle is part of a conditional compensation package. It has a retention clause for the first 12 months. Transferring ownership without company notification is a breach of contract. But since the signature is forged, this is not just a breach. It is theft. It is fraud." Gregory nodded. "We have seen this before. You are not the first high-performing female executive to have a partner who feels entitled to her success. Last year, I pushed for a new policy regarding financial abuse. Northline Media protects its assets, and our employees are our most valuable assets." He slid a piece of paper across the table. "We are taking 2 actions immediately," Gregory explained. "First, legal is drafting a formal demand letter to your mother-in-law and the dealership she used to collateralize the vehicle. We are claiming the car as disputed corporate property. If she does not surrender it within 24 hours, we file a police report for grand theft auto." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Police, Ethan?" "He said he would ruin my reputation if I went to the authorities." "Let him try," Gregory said coldly. "Second, this is the contact information for Alicia Park. She is the best divorce and financial crimes attorney in Denver. The company has retained her on your behalf as part of our legal aid benefit." I felt tears prick my eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. I was afraid you would fire me for the drama." "Fire you?" Gregory raised an eyebrow. "You are the plaintiff, Lauren. We are the witnesses." Just then, a junior legal aide hurried into the room with a tablet. She whispered something to Reynolds, who frowned and tapped the screen before sliding it toward me. "Ms. Mitchell, we decided to audit the payroll logs while we were discussing this," Reynolds said, her voice grave. "It appears your signing bonus, the $15,000 that was supposed to hit your account last Friday, was redirected." I stared at the screen. An email, sent from my work address but time-stamped at 2 in the morning when I was asleep, requested a change of direct deposit for the bonus sum only. The destination account was not our joint account. It was an account I didn't recognize. That is not my writing style," I whispered, reading the email. "I never used the phrase expedite the funds. We traced the IP address," the aide said softly. "It came from a residential connection in Aurora. Your home." Ethan had impersonated me. He had logged into my work email, likely from my laptop while I slept, and stolen $15,000 before I even knew I had it. He hadn't just taken the car, he had systematically looted my career. I looked up at Gregory. The fear that had been paralyzing me for a week was gone. In its place was something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Gregory smiled, a terrifying, predatory smile. "Go see Alicia, and when you go home tonight, do not say a word. Let them think they have won. We strike when the paperwork is ready." I walked out of that conference room 10 minutes later, clutching a thick folder of evidence. My hands were no longer shaking. I walked past the open office area, past the break room, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the tired wife supporting a dreamer. I felt like a hunter who had just been handed a loaded rifle. Ethan and Martha thought they were playing a game with a naive girl. They had no idea they had just declared war on a woman backed by $1 billion legal team. I met Alicia Park at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the Denver courthouse. She was nothing like the chaotic, emotional storm I had been living in for years. She was stillness personified. She wore a sharp navy suit and drank her black coffee with the precision of a surgeon. She listened to my story without interrupting, her eyes scanning the documents Gregory had prepared. "This is not a marriage dispute. Lauren," Alicia said, setting the papers down, "this is financial violence wrapped in a domestic bow. He is banking on the fact that you are too embarrassed to call it what it is. Theft." "I just want to make sure I am protected," I said, my voice quiet. "Then we stop playing nice," Alicia replied. "Today, you open a new bank account at a different institution. You reroute your salary. You lock every joint credit card. And most importantly, you become a spy in your own home. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. Use that." I left the cafe with a terrifying list of tasks. I downloaded a voice recorder app on my phone and tested it 3 times in my car before I drove to Martha's house. I told myself I was going there to try and talk things out one last time. In reality, I was walking into the lion's den with a wire. Martha's driveway was occupied by my charcoal sedan. My stomach turned. She had slapped a bumper sticker on the rear fender that read, "World's Best Mom" in glittery letters. It felt like she had tagged a masterpiece with graffiti. Inside, the house smelled of potpourri and old secrets. Martha was beaming, pouring tea as if she hadn't stolen a $50,000 asset. "Oh, Lauren, you should see how smooth it drives," Martha gushed. "I took it down to the pawnbroker. Well, the title lender, actually. They gave me a lovely cash advance against the equity. I needed to redo the patio, and since the car was a gift, I figured why let it sit there depreciating." I felt the blood drain from my face. She had leveraged the stolen car for a high-interest loan. You mortgaged the car?" I asked, making sure my phone in my pocket was recording. "It is just cash flow, dear." She waved a hand. "Ethan said it was brilliant." Ethan walked in from the kitchen then, holding a beer. He looked agitated. When I mentioned that Northline Media was considering police action regarding the vehicle, his face darkened instantly. He slammed the beer bottle onto the counter. "You would not dare," Ethan hissed, stepping into my personal space. "If you bring the cops into this, Lauren, I swear, I will tell your precious company about the time you... Well, I have stories, private matters. I will ruin your reputation so fast you won't be able to get a job at a diner." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to look small. I hunched my shoulders, letting my voice tremble. "I am scared, Ethan," I whimpered, backing away. "I don't know what to tell them. The paperwork. They are asking for the paperwork." "I told you I handled it," Ethan shouted, throwing his hands up. "I signed the transfer. I took care of the legal side because you were too weak to make the hard choice. I did everything. Why can't you just be grateful?" "You signed it," I asked softly. "You signed my name." "Yes, I signed your name." He roared. To save this family. I let him scream for another 2 minutes, capturing every threat, every admission of forgery, and every word of his gaslighting. Then, I wiped a fake tear from my cheek. "I have to go," I whispered. "I can't be here." "Yeah, run away." Ethan sneered. "Go cry to your boss. Just remember who holds the cards here." I drove straight to my mother's small house in Lakewood. It was a modest, siding-clad bungalow that I hadn't visited enough in recent years because Ethan hated the smell of poverty. I sat on the edge of the twin bed in the guest room and emailed the audio file to Alicia. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "He just handed us the keys to the kingdom," Alicia said, her voice sounding almost cheerful. He confessed to forgery, fraud, and blackmail on tape. He built the road to the courthouse and decided to lay down in front of the steamroller. I walked out to the front porch. The night air was biting. In the driveway sat my mother's 20-year-old station wagon. It was rusted. The muffler was held on by wire, and it leaked oil. But as I looked at it, I realized it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was fully paid for. It belonged to a woman who worked hard and owed no one. "It is over," I whispered to the night. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't just surviving. I was waiting for the sun to rise so I could watch them burn. The silence that followed my visit to Martha's house was not peace. It was the calculated stillness of a trap waiting to be sprung. For 3 days, under the guidance of Gregory and Alicia, I went radio silent. I let Ethan and Martha believe that my lack of response meant I was cowering, beaten into submission by their threats. While they relaxed, Northline Media's legal department was methodically dismantling their financial world. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. Northline sent a formal affidavit to the predatory title loan company where Martha had collateralized my car. The document stated clearly that the vehicle was disputed corporate property involved in an active fraud investigation. The dealership, terrified of being an accessory to a felony, immediately froze the transaction. I knew it happened because Martha called me 6 times in 1 hour. I let it go to voicemail. That afternoon, I executed the next step of Alicia's plan. I sent Ethan an email. It was a masterpiece of corporate diplomacy, drafted by Alicia to stroke his ego while tightening the noose. The subject line read, "Internal Financial Agreement and Promotion Transition." In the email, I claimed that in order for me to accept a new, higher-paying role at Northline, I needed to clean up our household liabilities on paper. I suggested a meeting with a financial mediator to sign a retroactive agreement. The hook was simple. I promised that if he signed the document acknowledging his management of the car sale and the bonus funds, I would waive my right to pursue criminal charges, allowing him to keep the investment money he had stolen. Ethan, blinded by the prospect of keeping the cash and his freedom, replied within 12 minutes. "Glad you are finally seeing sense. Babe, we will be there." The meeting took place in a rented conference room in downtown Denver, a neutral ground that smelled of lemon polish and anonymity. Alicia sat at the head of the table, dressed in a soft beige suit that made her look like a harmless consultant rather than a shark in legal waters. Ethan strutted in wearing his best jacket, Martha trailing behind him looking nervous. "Welcome," Alicia said, her voice soothing. "I am here to facilitate the asset separation agreement so Lauren can move forward with her compliance requirements." "Right," Ethan said, leaning back and putting his boots on the chair leg. "I have been telling Lauren she needs to organize her assets better. I am the one usually handling the macroeconomics of this family." "Of course," Alicia said, sliding a document toward him. "This agreement simply states that you, Ethan Cole, took full responsibility for the transfer of the vehicle and the reallocation of the $15,000 bonus on the specified dates. It confirms you acted alone to protect the family assets. Is that correct?" 100%, Ethan said, clicking a pen. "I made the executive call." "And the signature on the title transfer?" Alicia asked casually, not looking up from her notes. "I signed it," Ethan said, his voice loud and clear. Lauren was indisposed. "I signed it on her behalf to expedite the tax benefits." He signed the confession. Then, the cracks appeared. Martha, sensing the trap even if she couldn't see it, leaned over. "Ethan, maybe we should read the fine print about the loan repayment. Back off." "Mom," Ethan snapped, his arrogance peaking. "I know what I am doing. I am fixing the mess you made with that loan shark. Just like I fixed the credit card debt by opening those new lines under Lauren's name last year." The room went deadly still. Alicia looked up, her eyes sharp. "You opened credit lines under Lauren's name?" Alicia asked, feigning confusion. Without her present, I had to, Ethan shouted, looking at me with disdain. She has the credit score, but I have the vision. I forged the applications to build our future. Lauren, you should be thanking me. I sat frozen, my hands clenched under the table. He had just admitted to federal identity theft and credit card fraud in front of a witness. Well, Alicia said, closing her folder with a definitive snap. I think we have everything we need. Thank you for your transparency, Mr. Cole. Ethan stood up, grinning at me. See, was that so hard? Now we can go get dinner. My treat. Well, with the investment money? I will take a separate car, I said, my voice steady. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, Alicia's demeanor shifted instantly. She pulled a small remote from her pocket and pointed it at the smoke detector on the ceiling, turning off the high-definition camera concealed inside. We just got a signed confession for grand larceny and a verbal confession for identity fraud recorded on video, Alicia said, a terrifyingly satisfied smile playing on her lips. He admitted to the forgery, the theft, and the unauthorized credit lines. That is the trifecta. Lauren, we do not just have a case, we have a conviction wrapped in a bow. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the parking lot. I saw Ethan and Martha walking toward my car, the car they thought they still owned. They were laughing. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Gregory. My fingers didn't tremble. Code green. Send them in. I watched the message deliver, feeling a cold, dark satisfaction settle in my chest. The heist was over. The execution was about to begin. The following morning moved with the terrifying speed of an avalanche. At 9 o'clock, Gregory Hale convened an emergency meeting of the board of directors. I was not present, but the shockwaves were immediate. He did not use my name, but he laid out the scenario with brutal clarity. A high-level executive had been the target of identity theft and asset misappropriation by immediate family members. By 10 o'clock, a company-wide memo hit every inbox in the building. Northline Media was establishing a financial safety hotline and a legal defense fund for employees facing domestic financial abuse. It was a masterstroke. By framing the issue as a corporate security threat, Gregory had preemptively neutralized Ethan. If my husband tried to call the office to spread rumors or ruin my reputation as he had threatened, he would now be flagged instantly as a hostile actor, validating the company's narrative rather than hurting mine. By noon, Alicia Park had filed the civil suit for damages and a formal criminal complaint with the district attorney. Because Gregory had pulled strings with the city prosecutor, the paperwork did not sit in a pile. It was stamped and processed within the hour. At 2 in the afternoon, the police arrived at Martha's house in Aurora. I wasn't there to see it, but Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor Martha had bragged to, sent me a text message that simply read, "Police are towing the gray car. Is everything okay?" According to the police report Alicia read to me later, it was chaos. When the officers presented the warrant to seize the vehicle as evidence of fraud, Martha did not go quietly. She stood in the driveway, screaming that she was a victim, that her son had given her the car as a gift. But when the officers asked about the title loan she had taken out against the car, she crumbled. She produced the loan documents to prove she owned it, inadvertently handing them the physical proof that she had signed her name next to my forged signature. She had unknowingly documented her own complicity in the theft. My phone rang at 3:15. It was Ethan. "Lauren, please," his voice cracked, sounding nothing like the arrogant man who had sneered at me in the conference room. "You have to stop this. The cops. They took the car. They are talking about arrest warrants. You cannot do this to your family." I sat in my mother's kitchen, watching the steam rise from a cup of tea. "I am not doing anything. Ethan, the law is doing it. It was Mom," he shrieked, his panic rising to a fever pitch. "She pressured me. She said she needed the money for the house repairs. I just wanted to help her. I will pay you back. I swear. I will get a job. I will sell my equipment. Just call them off. You stole $15,000 from my payroll. Ethan, I said, my voice steady and cold. You forged my signature. You opened credit cards in my name. I did it for us. He sobbed. I love you. You love my money. I corrected him. Any further communication must go through my attorney, Ms. Park. I hung up and immediately saved the recording. The alliance between mother and son fractured before the sun went down. Martha, terrified of jail time, hired a strip mall lawyer who immediately advised her to cut a deal. By evening, Alicia informed me that Martha's lawyer had contacted the prosecutor, claiming that Ethan had manipulated his elderly mother into the scheme. In retaliation, Ethan started spilling secrets to anyone who would listen, revealing that this wasn't his first time. Apparently, he had used similar tactics on an ex-girlfriend 5 years ago, running up her credit before vanishing. They were tearing each other apart to survive. The court date was set for the following Monday. It was unprecedented speed, driven by the mountain of evidence we had compiled. I walked into Gregory's office late that evening to thank him. The city lights of Denver were just as bright as they had been on the night I thought my life was ending. But now they looked different. They looked like a future I actually owned. Take the rest of the week off, Mitchell, Gregory said, not looking up from his paperwork. Prepare yourself. Sleep. Eat. I am ready to testify, I said. Gregory finally looked up, his eyes sharp and serious. You will do fine. But remember this, in a courtroom, the most important moment is not when you speak, but when he has nothing left to say. I nodded and walked out. I had spent years listening to Ethan talk, listening to his excuses, his lies, and his grandiose plans. I realized with a jolt of satisfaction that I wasn't just going to court to get my money back. I was going there to silence him forever. The Denver County Court hearing room was smaller than I expected, but the air inside was heavy enough to crush a person. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from trembling. To my right, Alicia Park was a statue of calm focus, arranging her files with surgical precision. Behind me, I could feel the silent, steady presence of Gregory and Jada, my witnesses and my shield. Across the aisle, the defense table looked like a sinking ship. Ethan and Martha sat as far apart as the space allowed, each flanked by a lawyer who looked exhausted before the proceedings had even begun. Ethan would not meet my eyes. He stared at the water pitcher on the table, his leg bouncing in a nervous, erratic rhythm. The hearing began with Ethan's attorney trying to paint a portrait of a chaotic but loving marriage. Your Honor, the lawyer began, smoothing his tie. This is simply a domestic misunderstanding that has spiraled out of control. Mr. Cole has always managed the household finances with his wife's verbal consent. He believed he was acting in the best interest of their shared assets when he transferred the vehicle. There was no malicious intent. Alicia stood up slowly. She did not raise her voice. She simply held up a piece of paper. Your Honor, the defense claims verbal consent, Alicia said. However, I present Exhibit A, the employment contract stating the vehicle is the sole property of Northline Media and Lauren Mitchell. Exhibit B is an email sent to the payroll department at 2 a.m, impersonating my client to divert funds. And Exhibit C is a recording of the defendant admitting he forged the signature because, and I quote, she was too weak to make the hard choice. The audio played through the courtroom speakers. Ethan's voice, arrogant and cruel, filled the room. I signed your name to save this family. Ethan shrank into his chair, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Then came the turning point. Gregory was called to the stand. He walked up with the same commanding presence he held in the boardroom. When asked to describe the events, he didn't just recite facts. He painted a picture. I looked down from my office window. Gregory testified, his voice clear and resonant. I saw a woman who was not my employee driving a car that belonged to my employee. when she shouted that her son had given her the car because his wife did not need to be fancy. I realized in that second that Lauren Mitchell was not just dealing with a bad husband, she was the victim of systemic financial violence. That was the moment I decided Northline Media would no longer be a bystander. His words stripped away Ethan's devoted son mask and revealed the predator underneath. Ethan was no longer a misunderstood musician. He was a man who had cannibalized his wife's success to buy his mother's affection. Martha's lawyer tried to salvage the situation, arguing that Martha was an innocent beneficiary who simply accepted a gift. She had no way of knowing the title was forged, her lawyer argued. She thought she was borrowing the car. Objection, Alicia said, pulling out the final document. If Mrs. Cole thought she was merely borrowing the car, why did she sign this collateral loan agreement with a title lender, wherein she legally attested to being the sole owner of the vehicle to secure a cash loan? The courtroom went silent. Martha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She had trapped herself in her own greed. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for nonsense, adjusted her glasses and looked down at the defendants. I have heard enough, the judge stated. The court orders the immediate restitution of the vehicle to Ms. Mitchell. Furthermore, based on the admission of forgery and the evidence of identity theft, I am referring Mr. Cole to the district attorney for criminal prosecution regarding the stolen bonus funds and fraudulent credit lines. A temporary restraining order is granted effective immediately. As the gavel banged down, the sound echoed like a gunshot. Officers moved in. Ethan was not free to go. There were outstanding questions regarding the other frauds he had bragged about on tape. As they pulled him up from his chair, he looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. "Lauren!" he cried out. "Lauren, tell them!" I watched him being led away, and I felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, just a quiet, vast relief. Martha was sobbing into her hands, refusing to look at the daughter-in-law she had tormented for years. Her perfect mother image was shattered on the floor of a public courtroom. We walked out onto the courthouse steps into the blinding Colorado sunlight. The air tasted sweet. Gregory handed me a thick envelope. "The paperwork for your promotion to vice president," Gregory said simply, "and a new corporate policy. Your assets are now protected by a blind trust managed by the firm. No one can touch them but you." "Thank you, Gregory," I said, taking the file. "For everything." Across the street, a tow truck was unloading my charcoal sedan. It still had the Executive Mobility Program sticker on the windshield. It was just a car metal, glass, and rubber. But as I looked at it, I saw it for what it truly was. It wasn't a status symbol. It was a trophy of the war I had survived. I turned to Alicia, who was putting on her sunglasses. "It is over," she said. I smiled, a tired but genuine smile that reached all the way to my eyes. "Now we start a new life," I said, clutching the promotion papers tight. "But this time, no one takes anything away." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment down below and share your thoughts on Ethan's punishment. Did he get what he deserved? Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story of justice.